So this is one of our favorite times of year in the office because we are given the opportunity to help offset the costs of post-secondary education through our entrance award program. So these entrance awards are comprised of a variety of types of awards, and I want to just break down what those look like so you have some familiarity with the terminology. For some of you, this may be review. For some of you, this may be brand new. But in any case, it's worth going over. So the first award type is scholarships. And this is likely a term that you've heard many times before, whether or not you fully understand what these scholarships look like. But generally speaking, scholarships are based on merit. So we are primarily looking at high academic achievement, but depending on the scholarship at hand, we're also looking at a variety of other qualities, including leadership qualities, involvement in one's community, etc. Then we have bursaries. So bursaries are awards that are solely based on financial needs. So while scholarships are always prioritizing merit and academic achievement, bursaries are solely looking at what your financial need is and how we can help to, mitigate any barriers to you accessing post-secondary education. And then we have other awards which are often based on a variety of different factors, including some financial need and some academic merit. So we call these awards because that's an all-encompassing term, but the primary focuses of today's discussion will have to do with scholarships and bursaries. So when we're thinking through what exactly scholarships look like, we need to talk through who is eligible for them. So the scholarships that we're going to be talking about today are open to anybody who's been accepted to the Bachelor of Arts program and is coming directly to us from high school, from a gap year, or as adult learners, meaning that you haven't completed any other post-secondary studies. So as I mentioned, you would need to be offered admission, and I say this repeatedly because if you have not yet applied and you're thinking of joining us for fall 2025 intake, it is integral that you are completing and submitting that application for admission, hopefully today, so then we can process that as quickly as possible and still allow you to access and apply for scholarships and bursaries before the March 1st deadline. When we're thinking about scholarship eligibility and they being based around academic merit, of course, academic performance is going to be a crucial part of these. So we're looking for applicants who have a minimum admission average of 80% or higher. And when we say admission average, it's always important to consider the extent to which your admission average is not likely the overall high school average that you have. So we actually calculate your admission average on particular courses that we consider to be adequately preparatory for success in post-secondary studies within the arts. So if you're not sure what those courses look like, if you go to stu.ca/by province, you'll be able to see the different types of courses that we're looking at. Now, if your school doesn't have a percentile grading system, or perhaps you're in another country with an entirely different curricula, fear not, we will do conversion. So we're looking for an 80% or whatever is equivalent based in your curricula or your school system. We're also looking at things that go beyond grades for many of our higher value renewable entrance scholarships. So by that, I mean, we're looking at your grade 12 course program. We're looking at the levels of courses you're taking. If your school has level 1s, IB, or AP courses, are you taking advantage of those? Are you challenging yourself academically? We're also looking at well-roundedness and the extent to which your courses are balanced. So are you staying in one little silo of the academic world? Or again, are you challenging yourself to develop different skills and different ways of understanding these complex problems that we're faced with? So that's another factor we look at. We also are considering grade 11 performance and course program for those highest value full tuition scholarships. And finally, we need a submitted scholarship application. It sounds simple, but it bears repeating. The good news is you only need to submit one scholarship application to be automatically considered for every scholarship for which you're eligible at St. Thomas. So you may be asking yourself, what do we need to do for this scholarship application? And I am happy to report it is Not too daunting of a task, but if you have not yet done it, it is crucial that you do it. So when we're thinking through the scholarship application, there are three main components. The first of which is a scholarship application letter. This can be anywhere from 500 to 2,000 words, and I find sometimes students fixate on that upper limit of 2,000 words and think that they need to draw out what they're saying. You don't. We're looking for quality over quantity, so if you need 2,000 words, that's absolutely fine, but don't feel as though you need to stretch things out for the sake of it. And this letter is where you're able to go in depth about what you're most proud of during your high school career. So we're not looking for a laundry list of every single thing that you've done, but rather I would think through a couple of things that you're most proud of that you think are reflective of who you are as a person, what kinds of skills you've developed throughout your high school career, and what you'll bring to the STU community as well as the workforce beyond your time at St. Thomas. So, there's a lot of different things that you could focus on based on what your experiences are. We have some students who are very proud of different extracurricular accomplishments they've had, others who have taken really strong, high-profile leadership roles, either in their schools or their communities. We have other people who have had to overcome a lot of adversity and have demonstrated resilience through keeping up high grades. Whatever it may be, we really want you to explain it. Do not worry about over-explaining. We want to hear all the nitty-gritty details. So talk through what was required for you to get that accomplishment. Explain what kind of time went into it, what kinds of skills were required, how you hone those skills, etc. Spell out any acronyms. We don't always know what different clubs or societies' acronyms are. They often vary from province to province and country to country. So there's no such thing as being too explanatory in these letters. I'd also encourage you to avoid the temptation of being humble. We are asking you to brag about yourself, essentially, and I know that's not really what we're cultured to do, but it's imperative that we know what you've been up to. Be authentic and honest. We want to hear your voice. For those of you who have worked with different admissions counselors, we'll, of course, bring those discussions and what we know about you to the table when we're reviewing scholarship applications, but it's really helpful when the letter itself speaks to who you are and what your personality is like. Now, on a less exciting note, but a really imperative note, I would encourage you also to proofread your letter carefully and have someone else proofread your letters for spelling, grammar, and capitalization. We know that sometimes when you're intimately familiar with what you're trying to say, you may be more apt to miss typos, to not realize the extent to which a passage may be unclear. So having that second set of eyes can be very helpful in ensuring everything's cleaned up. But I cannot overstate the extent to which we will sometimes see letters that are for a student who has 100% average in an AP English class, but the letter is messy and sloppy and rushed. And that letter will essentially cast doubt on the validity of that 100% in your English class. So just be sure to take the time to read things over and ensure that you're happy and confident with your submission. And then the next kind of section of your scholarship application is an outline in your resume. So essentially what we're going to do is we'll give you a form that has different prompts. So it will say community involvement, leadership, athletics, etc. And what we're looking for you to do in this form is give us all of the breadth that you did not give us in your scholarship application letter. So in other words, the letter is where we want depth. We want to know all of, the details about who you are and a few things that you're most proud of. The next section, which is that form or resume section, is where we want all of the breadth, everything that you've been up to in the past 4 years, whether that's, your high school career or if you took a gap year as well, what you've been doing in that year. So we have a good sense of all of those other things that you weren't able to cover in your scholarship letter. This information is really helpful to us because sometimes we'll be looking at certain scholarships that have very specific criteria. So maybe preference is given to somebody who has demonstrated leadership in their community or hometown, for example. So maybe that isn't want you focused on in your letter, but if we have a record of that in this resume form section, then that will help us ensure that you're still considered for all of those awards that you may be eligible for. And then finally, we're looking for a letter of reference. This should be from somebody who knows you in the context of school. So whether that's a teacher, a guidance counselor, somebody who's supervised a club or society that you've been involved in, maybe a principal or vice principal, but we are looking for people who can speak to who you are in an academic setting, and ideally if they can speak to you outside of academics as well, so perhaps how you interact with other students inside or outside of the classroom, that would make for a really strong reference letter. Now, if you have not asked for a reference letter just yet, and it is February 22nd and the deadline is March 1st, I would encourage you to submit that reference request at your earliest convenience, perhaps today, so that reference does have some time to provide that letter. You will be asked to upload that letter on their behalf in your scholarship application form. So ideally, that referee will send you the reference letter and you'll be able to upload it in the scholarship application form. But if they're not comfortable doing that, or they're not sure that they'll have that reference letter done in time for the March 1st deadline, you also can simply upload a Word document that says something to the effect of my scholarship letter, reference letter rather, will be sent separately after submission of my scholarship application. So we know it's coming and we can add it to your file once we receive it, either directly from your referee or from you. And then there's also a small requirement for international students to provide some additional context in terms of their financial situation. This helps us evaluate whether or not they're likely to be able to receive a study permit, and if they are likely to receive a study permit due to their financial background, how we can help to bridge any gaps that may be limiting their opportunities to study at St. Thomas and in Canada. And we have many more things to discuss, so I will turn our attention to bursaries. Now, bursaries, as I mentioned, are just based on financial needs, so there isn't as much required for the bursary application. We, of course, need you to have been offered admission to our Bachelor of Arts program for fall 2025. So again, if you haven't applied yet, please do that. And then we're going to be basing these bursaries on financial need, as I mentioned before. Like the scholarships, you only need to submit one bursary application, and you'll automatically be assessed for any bursary for which you qualify. So you don't have to worry about going through our website and picking out which bursaries you think you may meet the criteria for. We will do all of that work for you. So when we're thinking through these bursary applications, there's really only two main components. The first is a form section that's asking about financial information primarily for parents and guardians as well as other supporters. So we would be asking about their occupations, income, numbers of dependents that they're supporting, etc. So it is very unusual for a student to be able to complete this section without the help of their parent or guardian. So as you're doing this bursary section, I would ensure that you have your parents or guardians available to you to answer any of those questions that it would be very rare for a student to know the answers to. Now, the second part of this bursary application is what I would argue is the most important. So this is a bursary application letter. It only has to be a maximum of 500 words. So we're not looking for the next best, the next great American novel or anything like that. We're really just looking for any context to those numbers that you provided in the form. So we're looking for anything that would add to our understanding of your financial situation. We know that oftentimes these numbers are not reflective of somebody's reality. So for example, I worked with a student last year who had a very high income on this form. However, they had one parent living in their hometown, kind of raising the majority of the family, while another parent was living separately in Halifax, caring for one of the siblings who needed care at the IWK. We know that there's a lot of expenses that come up in life that may not be accounted for in the numbers that we're asking for. So this letter is your opportunity to provide that context. We also ask for any efforts that you've made, any employment-related information. So are you currently working? Do you plan to work full-time in the summer? Are there barriers to you working? So for example, sometimes we work with rural students who aren't able to afford a car to offset what it would cost to get a part-time job, right? So there's a lot of things that we know may affect your ability to support your education. this section is where you can provide us that kind of information, any extenuating circumstances, special needs, or other financial requirements you think it would be helpful for us to be aware of. So you now hopefully are ready to apply for scholarships and bursaries if you haven't already. And this is something that you can find very easily for those of you who have already been accepted, of course. So you would have applied at stu.ca/apply now. This is where you can log into your applicant portal. And if you log into that, you will see something like what's on the screen right now. So this is where you would have been able to access your admission decision. And you'll see in this top toolbar where it says My Applications, there's a button that says Next Steps. So you'll want to click that, and then we'll transition the slide to show you what you'll be able to see once you click that Next Steps button. So once you do that, you'll be able to have a list of what your next step should be based on your application for admission and your acceptance to St. Thomas. The very first step is applying for scholarships and bursaries. So it is not buried. We are not trying to create any additional barriers to having you apply for scholarships or bursaries. We have it front and center, step number one. And right in that first sentence or second sentence, I believe, is a hyperlink to the scholarship and bursary application. So you just click that link, which is highlighted in green, and then you will have your scholarship and bursary application pop up. There will be two check boxes, one that says you're applying for scholarships, one that says that you're applying for bursaries. If you're not sure whether you qualify for either, please apply for both. You never know what the other pool of applicants will be. And you also never know what kinds of awards we may be offering students. So in other words, we may have awards that are specifically designated for a student in your community. We would hate for you to miss out on that because you thought you didn't qualify for a scholarship or bursary. So please check off both of those boxes. And as soon as you do, your screen will then populate the entirety of the scholarship and bursary applications. It will kind of auto import some information from your application for admission. So just check that over, ensure that none of your contact information has changed since you did apply for admission. And then you'll see all of the prompts to have you submit your scholarship letter, your scholarship form, your scholarship reference, your bursary form, and your bursary letter. So it's all in one place. We try to make it as easy as possible. But of course, we're here to help. So if and when you are doing this, you have questions, do not be shy. We want to be supportive of you through this process. And the last thing we want, as I mentioned before, is for you to not take advantage of these opportunities because you either think you don't qualify or perhaps you have questions you don't want to ask, or maybe you're just feeling overwhelmed about the whole process. We totally understand that. I was the first person in my family to go to post-secondary, and I came as an international student. So I was very uncertain of what this process would look like. And it was thanks to support that I was able to get that I was able to take advantage of scholarships and bursaries that were made available to me. So we are here to support. So on that note, I wanted to see what kinds of questions you folks have to ensure that we're answering anything and everything that you are wondering about. So the first question that I am seeing is submitting transcripts and resume mandatory for a scholarship? So these are mandatory, but you would have already submitted your transcript in order to be offered admission to St. Thomas. So we're not going to ask for you to submit it as part of your scholarship application, because if you are able to even access our scholarship application, we can surmise you already submitted your transcripts because you've been offered admission. So you don't have to worry about submitting them again necessarily. But if you applied to STU long ago, say in July or September, and we may not have your first semester transcripts, you're still in high school and you're at a semestered school, then it would be helpful for you to have your office send us a separate copy of your transcript with the most updated grades. That would only help you, of course. And then the resume section of your scholarship application is really a form. So we're not looking for you to necessarily upload your separate professional resume that you would use to apply for a job, for example, but rather we're looking for you to complete those prompts that would give us a better idea of what your involvement has been throughout your high school career. So that's not just involvement in school or the community, but we're also looking for things like part-time employment, summer employment, anything and everything like that would be really helpful for us to know. And like I said, we try to prompt you. So if you perhaps forget something, I hope that that prompt will help to jog your memory and help you remember all that you've been up to. So another question that we have is, I have an application sent in, but have not been accepted yet. Am I able to apply for scholarships and bursaries at a later date? So that's a great question. So the first thing that I'll say is, if you have a scholarship in, or rather an application for admission in, and we have everything that we need to make a decision on your file, then you can rest assured we're going to expedite the review of those applications for admission to ensure you do in fact have access to the scholarship and bursary application prior to the March 1st deadline. Now, if we're still waiting on transcripts or other required supplementary documents to make an admission decision on your file, I would strongly encourage you to ensure that we're getting those supplementary docs as soon as we possibly can. But if we don't have them in by that March 1st deadline, if you don't yet have an offer of admission by March 1st, fear not, the bursary and scholarship application will still be available after March 1st. However, you will no longer be considered in the first round of scholarship and bursary reviews. So I would do anything you possibly can to get those outstanding documents into us to ensure that you have the most robust list of scholarships and bursary opportunities available to you. Wow, there are lots of questions coming in. I love this. I'm going to be a bit brief in answering some of them just to ensure we can get through as many as possible. One is, can we get a full scholarship from STU? Yes, we have a variety of full tuition scholarships. They are, of course, competitive, so it would really be essential that you've had strong, consistent academic performance, not only in terms of that grade point average, but also in terms of the different courses and programs that you've taken, as I mentioned before. And again, for those full tuition scholarships, we're usually looking not only at your grade 12 performance, but also at your grade 11 performance. So consistency is very important. We have some students who are asking about reference letters that they already submitted through the Common App. That's perfect. So if you've already submitted reference letters through Common App, you don't need to upload another reference letter. Again, when you're submitting your scholarship app through STU's application portal, just submit a document in the scholarship reference letter section that says, my scholarship reference letters were submitted through Common App, and then we'll ensure all of your files are amalgamated. So I have a student asking, for transfer students to get a scholarship, would I still have to have a high school teacher give a reference letter, or would a current university teacher be better? So we actually would not have scholarships available for students who are applying as transfer students into the Bachelor of Arts program. So in that case, a reference letter wouldn't be required for your application. Another student has asked what the deadline is, so let's repeat it. I think it bears repeating. March 1st is the scholarship and bursary application deadline. We have somebody who's asking how many students get scholarships and bursaries. So if we look at last year's data, it was over 8 students out of 10. So the odds are in your favor, but again, you have to take advantage of the opportunity and you have to be mindful of the deadline. Let's just see what other questions we have. Some questions asking just about the value of scholarships that are available. So they actually range in value from $500 to over $100,000. So there is quite a range. And the way that our internal process works is that we start with the largest value scholarships, and we will automatically look at every single student who's applied for scholarships, and we'll say, do they meet the requirements for this highest value scholarship? And if Christy doesn't meet that requirement, we'll then see, does she meet the requirement for the next highest value scholarship, and so on and so forth. So you don't have to worry about missing an opportunity. I have somebody who's asking about scholarships for the BED program, and that is a different system. So if you've been accepted to the Bachelor of Education program, congratulations. Information about scholarships specific to the BED program are made available to students after they've accepted their offer of admission into the BED program. So if you've already accepted that offer in the past week, you can expect to get information on BED scholarships in the coming weeks. Great questions coming from students. I can't remember a Q&A that's been this busy, and it makes me very excited for what the future holds. I have a student who's asking if they're thinking about January 2026 admission, should they still submit their scholarship application by March 1st? Yes, I would strongly encourage you to get it in for March 1st. Let's see what else we have. Are English proficiency tests necessary for scholarships if schooling has been in English? So again, kind of like the transcript question, you wouldn't have to submit an additional English language proficiency test for scholarships. If you've already been offered admission, then we would presumably have whatever supplementary documents, including English language proficiency tests that would have been required for you. If you are still in the application for admission process and you may be prompted to provide a proficiency test, then you're certainly welcome to send us an email and say, all of my education has been in English, perhaps my country's first language is English, any extenuating circumstances that would help us would be really appreciated. We normally will catch those things automatically, but I will say that upon submitting your application for admission, there is a checklist that is automatically generated with any supplementary documents that the system assumes you will need based on what you indicated in your application for admission. But we as humans always will intervene and read over that, or usually in the next business day, to modify that checklist in any way that is required. And thank you for bearing with me as I read through these different questions. There's so many that are wonderful. Some of them are a little bit redundant, so I'm just trying to tease out any that are a bit different. So I have a question that says, can I complete a scholarship application while applying for admission at the same time after March 1st? No. So you would need to be offered admission to St. Thomas before you're able to submit your application for scholarships and bursaries. So be sure to apply for admission and provide those supplementary documents as soon as possible at this point. And let's see what other questions we have. So there's a question that's asking if they can qualify for both scholarships and bursaries. So the answer is a resounding yes. If you apply for both scholarships and bursaries, we're going to consider you for both scholarships and bursaries. And there is no rule or stipulation that says if you're holding one type of award, you can't hold another type of award. So we're always doing a holistic assessment based on what our students are telling us their achievements are and based on what our students are telling us their financial need is. So one would never preclude you from receiving the other. It's quite common to receive both a scholarship and a bursary. I have another question that says, I wasn't super involved in high school. Will I not be able to qualify for a scholarship? So as I mentioned, the core component to scholarships is academic performance and academic merit. So academics would be the most important piece of that puzzle. However, we are, as I mentioned before, only looking for a minimum admission average of 80% when we're evaluating folks for scholarships. And some awards are very much based on leadership or community involvement rather than exceptional academics. So we certainly have some that are very much rooted in trying to promote leadership on campus and bring leaders to campus. But on the flip side, we have many that are only based on academics. So even if you haven't done anything in high school, you still may qualify for those scholarships. So again, be sure to apply, and then we'll automatically assess you for any awards that you would meet the criteria for.